Let me say a pleasant good evening to former Army Battalion Commander and retired Major. He's also the CEO of Air Support Tactical Security Limited and one of this country's top consultants for security risk management, Mr. Dirk Barnes. Mr. Barnes, pleasant good evening.
Good evening, Mikey, and good evening to all your viewers and to the Observer team.
Thank you so much. Government looks to create gun-free zones and other policies. There are some things that you agree with, but as far as some of the proposals to amend the firearm laws, you are questioning those parts. And what parts are you questioning and you find to be unfair?
Well, the gun-free zones is something of much contention. I mean, since this topic popped up a couple of days ago, you know, all of the firearms groups, instructor groups have basically lit up, and people are asking, what are these gun-free zones? What is it supposed to accomplish? Now, I want to say any politician that is engaged in creating laws or talking about laws, passing laws, especially when it comes to something that falls under the Ministry of National Security, the only concern should be the public interest, not a political agenda. And that public interest is for safety and security. Now, if you create safe zones for guns or gun-free zones, and you are earmarking these as laws, you would expect, by logic, that law-abiding citizens that are allowed to carry firearms will have to observe these laws, and they themselves wouldn't go into these areas that with their firearms. So these are areas that you must go. You're talking about schools, you're talking about banks, you know, so you have to go to these places. And if you go to these places without your firearm, and the bandits who are criminals, and by definition, a criminal will commit crimes, offenses against the laws, the same laws that you're now trying to create, the same laws that they have been ignoring all the time, they are going to go into that area with their firearms and ply their trade of robbery and mayhem. It means then that you have a part of the society that is now not as vulnerable as others, but you're making them vulnerable and putting them into an area and saying to the bandits, no, this area is guaranteed not to have self-defenders. I do not see how that is safety and security.
Yeah, and Mr. Barnes, that's the issue. I mean, right-thinking citizens are saying, listen, what is the issue with someone with a legal firearm? It seems as though these policies are giving an edge to the criminal elements because they don't have to abide by these policies. They don't have to abide by having to go through some sort of long vetting process. Why is it that it seems as though this is more criminal friendly than trying to stop the illegal firearms and going after those people who are using these illegal guns to commit crimes?
Well, I will say this. There's an old saying that people fear what they don't understand. And most politicians, and I say most because I know there are a couple of exceptions, they don't understand firearm technology. They don't understand what constitutes a firearm, what constitutes ammunition. So then they create these new type of definitions like assault weapons and high-powered weapons and all these different things to frighten the public into their agendas. So right now, they are trying to vilify legal firearm holders, self-defenders. That's what we are. We are self-defenders. And they're trying to vilify this part of the community to take away these guns so that they, the politicians, can feel safer. Because they are always feeling unsafe. They are always feeling targeted. We see it with the size of their security details and the type of weapons and sophistication. Imagine TSTP was afforded his the manager there, or the CEO, managing director, was being given a security detail as well.
That's right.
This is how they look at it. They want to protect themselves, but the remainder of the population should not be protected. This is how our politicians are currently thinking.
We can understand, and I do agree with you as far as looking at some of the firearm laws. A lot of it is archaic and totally outdated. And getting to establish a firearms license board, yes, I believe that the power of getting these FULs should not be a decision by any politician and should not be in the hands of a politician to say who qualifies and who does not qualify.
And that is correct. At no point in time should in any firearms act or firearms control act or whatever you want to create, should there be a sentence that has the word minister, prime minister, or any member of cabinet. That should not exist. So when we start talking about the firearms licensing board, I have been an advocate for something like this for years. You could probably find song bites where I did interviews before talking about the licensing board, and I will say again, there is a requirement to have a licensing board. We need to upgrade it. Not take everything away from the commissioner, but add in some other agencies into the process. Agencies such as customs, agencies such as the SSA, the Defense Force. And why? Because right now, when you apply for an FUL, an investigation is done, and that investigation, as myopic as it is right now, is insufficient, because that investigation only looks at what the TTPS would have on you. It only looks at their Versadex, it looks at the certificate of character, and whatever human intelligence they gather when they conduct their interviews. But at the same time, we all know this. The SSA is conducting intelligence. The Defense Force is conducting intelligence. Customs gathers intelligence. Even prisons, they gather intelligence. But none of these intelligence reports on potential threats are being allowed into the system to feed for an application. And this is where a problem exists. You have people who are slipping through the system because they're not on the police radar, but they might very well be on customs radar for drug trafficking, or they might be on the Defense Force or SSA radar for terrorism. But this information is not being promulgated and shared into one central database that will assist the police in their investigation. So the Firearm Licensing Board is an opportunity to bring representatives from these organizations to feed into the process.
And you're saying that in itself makes a lot of sense. What about the psychological aspect of it? Is there an assessment done as well?
Well, there's always a psychometric test, it's not a psychometric, it's a psychological report that is done by a doctor when you apply for the position. And I think that should continue. So really and truly, our process right now in Trinidad and Tobago, as it exists without any amendments, the process itself is very, very restrictive. But what's happening now is that because the process is not documented, as in it's a straight process that I am at step A, I'm going to step B, I'm going to step C, because that is not documented, there's a challenge. And let me tell you how far, Mikey, this is not documented. Through my attorneys in the past, over the past 2 years, we have done a series of freedom of information requests from the TTPS, asking for the process for FUL, process for import, the process for disposals, nearly every single process in this thing, and we have gotten responses. But to get those responses took a lot of fighting. In fact, imagine you're asking the TTPS to say, please, tell us what is the process for an application. And the first response you will get from them is that, well, we will need more time to determine that, we need 30 days. The second response, well, we will need 30 days to determine that. How can you, the TTPS, be telling an attorney through the Freedom of Information Act that you don't know what the process is and you have to check and find out that it's taken 60 days to tell us what is the process? So this goes that the process has been so fluid, so changing, so dynamic over the time that nobody sat down and really documented. So this amendment, they can actually put in law what the process is, and so it has to be observed. And you know what that does? It removes any chance of anybody inserting themselves and then trying to speed up the process or change process for compensation.
Now, and trying to put this entire thing together to find some essence of logic and picking sense from nonsense. And again, it overlaps into the political realm of things, because we were told as citizens of this country from a former attorney general who's functioning in a different capacity now, that all the legislation, especially gang legislation, knew exactly who the gang members were, where they slept, if they ordered a 2-piece with pepper, everything. And now it seems that we are getting this perception that there are gun owners out there, or should I say people who own the stores that are selling the gun dealers, who are just letting people walk in, pay a price, and just walk out with a gun, which is not the fact, which is not the truth. The fact of the matter is that law-abiding citizens with guns are not the ones who are jumping walls and coming through windows and attacking senior citizens and burning them and sexually assaulting your family and snuffing out your life every single day. At this point in time, we are at 205 murders for the year, which is more murders than days of the year already. How many of those murders can one say it was done by a law-abiding gun license holder in this country?
Well, up to now we haven't heard of any, but you touch on something there that I need to talk about.
Go ahead.
When this whole gun thing started a couple of years ago, on the departure of one commissioner and the entrance of another, you would recall that there was political announcements that they were going to start an audit of the entire process. 4 retired police officers were brought in. The PSB ran a separate investigation. Now, let me speak about the PSB investigation. Under Senior Superintendent Martin, now DCP Martin, officers were sent to all of the firearm dealers, every single one. I fell in that because I am also a firearm dealer. And I will speak about my experience. These gentlemen and lady came to my organization and they went through every single document, every customs document, every import order, every import license, every export license, and they reconciled everything. They made sure that every weapon I would have imported was a weapon that I sold. And if I did not sell it, it was sitting down in my armory. That is what they did. When they were finished, they left. They put an entry in my registers, and they said everything was correct, and then they left. I would imagine they would have done this at all of the firearm dealers. So they know exactly how many weapons were imported to Trinidad and Tobago. Now, if they found that something was wrong, I could guarantee I would have been charged and brought before the courts. I could guarantee that. So any time people are saying that the firearm dealers were involved, I would like anybody to please point in a direction and tell me which firearm dealer has been charged 2 years later based on them selling weapons to the illegal enterprise. It did not happen. Now, politicians, for whatever reason, will try to sell one thing. That is their prerogative, but the truth is the truth. If anybody asks how many people have been charged, nobody has been charged. And there's nothing to prevent the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service from charging a firearm dealer for not being able to account for weapons that he would have imported or sold.
Yeah, and again, when you look at it, I know that Attorney Nairi Alfonso, who has been on this program several times, has discussed this as well. At the start of the year, the Commissioner of Police announced that all FUL holders had to renew their permits, including those who were issued FULs before 2004 when the Firearms Act was amended. And she pointed to Section 17.6 of the Firearms Amendment Act, which says FULs granted before the passage of the legislation in 2004 will remain valid unless terminated or revoked. And she of course, the police service asked for more time to respond and what have you. But if Parliament intended the legislation to have retroactive effect on the FULs issued before the year 2004, then it would have to plainly say so. And it is quite clear that when you look at it now, the language used was implied rather than expressed, and that brought a cloud over the issue at hand.
And that was that's what people sometimes commonly call the grandfather rule. You had people who would have had FULs and firearms prior to 2004 that were not subjected to any of these fees. And as far as they were concerned, when they created those laws, they put in that grandfather rule to say, listen, we would not let these people have to go through this new regime and this new licensing and all these fees. They will continue as per norms. But for whatever reason, the Commissioner of Police decided to have a blanket statement that fell on all of those people. And instead of backing down and saying, well, hey, we heard they went wrong and strong, we wait to see how that comes out in court. I mean, and you know the sad part about this, Mikey? There have been so many litigation matters coming out of the decisions from this commissioner and the one just before that has been reaching before the courts, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago now have to foot that bill of trying to defend these matters that will potentially lose and will have to pay costs. The day a commissioner of police have to sit down and pay costs out of their pocket for their own decisions is the day we start to get better decisions. Because right now, a commissioner of police has the discretion to deal with firearm applications. But you know what they choose to say? Not giving a decision is my discretion. You are required, because it's an applicant, which means an application. An application has been sent forth to you, a public office holder, and you are required by the mere fact that you occupy that office to answer an applicant. The answer could be yes, and the answer could be no. That is your discretion, which answer you want to give. But to say I'm not going to treat that is discretion is impossible. There's no way you could justify that. But that has been the practice of many commissioners, with the exception of one that we know.
And Mr. Barnes, trust me, the public, the majority of the public, when we hear guns, we immediately want to know that these guns are taken off the street. And when we hear legal firearms, we are pleased to know that this can be handed and given out to citizens who are worthy and qualified for it, so there'll be a fighting chance against the criminal elements. That's all we're saying. We are saying, listen, we want to have a fighting chance. We don't want to be sitting ducks. Many people who never in their life would have ever thought about owning a firearm are now thinking along those lines, because they simply cannot sit there and wait for someone to jump the wall, to come in, to abuse your family, to do you all sorts of things. And at the end of the day, you just have to sit there and take it. We don't want that.
And I completely agree with you. And this is why, we should demand as citizens that all of these ministers and top office holders in governments, that they don't have a security detail. Jump in your car and drive to work like the rest of us.
Yeah.
Go home like the rest of us. Be a part. If you want to be one of us, you are a citizen. Do what we do. Don't have these large security details. And if you do have these large security details, give them a baton, a flashlight, no more firearms.
And you're right.
Because that is essentially what it is they're telling us. But the criminals are not going to stop carrying firearms. Now, I'm not advocating that. I will never advocate this. As much as I'm an instructor and I'm a firearms dealer, I will never advocate that everybody in Trinidad should have a gun. That is irresponsible of anybody to say, because not everybody has the temperament or the mindset to carry a firearm.
So true.
However, I would say that there is a part of the community that can assist in being self-defenders. Like, let me give you something, for example. I am an advocate for the Civil Defense Force and the Police Service. Every member of the Defense Force and the Police Service, by nature of the fact that they are enlisted, should have an FUL and should carry a weapon. However, the threshold for maintaining that weapon should be much higher than everybody else. In other words, you get yourself in a DUI, or you are involved in any kind of domestic, your weapon is immediately taken away. There is no ifs, ands, buts, or maybes. So you would find that these officers would hold themselves a much higher standard. They'll keep themselves out of trouble because they know they could lose that firearm. Now, imagine what effect that would have, because nearly every community, even some of the big ones, the big communities, have a law enforcement officer, a defense force officer, somebody along that particular line living in their community. That is a first responder. That is a defender.
That's right. So they're there in the community. Mr. Barnes, I want to thank you so much for taking time out to talk with us this evening. Hope to have you back on soon. Best of luck to you and your entire team, and please keep up the fight. For all of us out there who need to feel secure, please don't give up the fight.
No problem. I won't. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.